Welcome to Orthodox Library. I would like to introduce a first among many in a series of which we review and analyze articles and books relating to religion and history, things pertaining to or defending Orthodox faith and practice. Again, thank you for listening, and please enjoy. The purpose of this video will be to provide a summary and some comments of the main arguments presented in the article Prayers of Jews to Angels and Other Intermediaries During the First Centuries of the Common Era by Dr. Meir Bar-Ilan. The paper, simply put, provides clear evidence of intercessory prayers within ancient and medieval Judaism, showing relevant examples and even highlights how common these were, thus supporting the position that prayers toward saints have a Jewish origin. The broader discussion regarding the existence of intercessory prayers within Second Temple Judaism has been slowly evolving over time, due to mainly stale interactions between apostolic churches and Protestant ones on this topic. However, over the recent few decades, a substantial number of data points have been uncovered and research papers have been written about them, pushing the debate forward along newfound lines. Dr. Meir Bar-Ilan has lectured at numerous academic institutions: Bar-Ilan University, Hebrew University, Harvard University, and Vienna University. Dr. Bar-Ilan's work encompasses a wide variety of subjects related to Jewish studies, history, and society, such as Bible, pseudepigrapha, Talmud, Jewish liturgy, ancient Hebrew poetry, but also mystics, magic, medicine, astronomy, calendar, astrology, mathematics, and numerology. He has written several books and articles and provided peer review on the above-mentioned topics. We will start by reading out the introduction to the text by the author before we proceed to provide the summary. Quote, "It has been claimed that angels with divine power have no place in Judaism, a monotheistic religion, as the strength of such a religion lies in the exclusivity of the divinity. Angels can thus be no more than messengers, fulfilling God's commandments. Indeed, in traditional Jewish prayer, there appears to be no mention of the status of angels in general, nor of their role as intermediaries in prayer in particular. On the surface, the Siddur, or prayer book, would seem to indicate that Jews do not pray to angels or other divine agents, but solely to the Lord. This, however, is not the case. Extensive analysis of the various sources of Talmudic literature reveals that there is some substance to the polemical claims of early Christians that Jews at the time did pray to angels. The current paper seeks to bring together all the evidence of Jewish prayers to angels and other intermediaries that can be found in sources from the 1st centuries CE." End quote. The article starts off with a strong claim that ancient Judaism utilized intercessory prayers because we find them during the Middle Ages. The author regards the area of prayer as being conservative and thus unlikely to be subject to change over time, and that later evidence of a particular activity can usually be traced back to an earlier prototype. The first prayer analyzed by the author is one of forgiveness that is recited before and after the Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah. The prayer goes like this: "Usherers of mercy, usher in our plea for mercy before the Master of mercy. You who cause prayer to be heard, may you cause our prayer to be heard before the hearer of prayer. You who cause our outcry to be heard, may you cause our outcry to be heard before the hearer of outcry. You who usher in tears, may you usher in our tears before the King who finds favor through tears. Exert yourselves and multiply supplication and petition before the King, God, exalted and most high." This is seen as clear evidence for the intercessory activity of angels, who function as gatekeepers, quote-unquote, for the petitions that go up to God. The second prayer mirrors the first one and goes as follows. And so may it be thy will, Lord our God, and God of our fathers, that all the angels appointed to oversee the shofar and its various sounds will ascend before your seat of glory, and recommend favorably for us to atone for our sins. The author remarks that these prayers are undoubtedly seen as intercessory, since halakhic authorities have unsuccessfully tried to eliminate them from the prayer books or mask their meaning. Another interesting aspect presented in the paper is a Talmudic passage in which the rabbinical authority proclaims, in the name of God, that people in trouble should appeal directly to God himself, and not to angels such as Michael or Gabriel. Despite this apparent prohibition, within the Midrash of Canticles, we find a passage that highlights the role of angels of guarding the gates of prayer and tears, quote unquote, and facilitating the passage of prayers from the faithful to God. The author continues with the presentation of resources by pointing towards 3 Aggadic examples, which is a part of the Oral Torah, which include appeals to not only angels, but also other unexpected entities. The story of Rabbi Eliezer ben Dardoya is based in Babylon and features the eponymous protagonist as an accomplished connoisseur of prostitutes, who, out of his desire to utilize the services of a certain harlot, decides to undertake an arduous journey, crossing 7 rivers for her sake, quote unquote. However, his luck runs out when the woman curses the rabbi to never receive forgiveness for his sins. Desperate, Rabbi Eliezer pleads for intercession from a wide range of earthly and celestial bodies, such as hills and mountains, heaven and earth, sun and moon, stars and constellations. Ultimately, his prayer of supplication is accepted by God. The next example is about the prophet Moses and is narrated by a Karaite scholar. Karaism is a sect of Judaism that rejects the Oral Torah as having a divine origin and separates itself from rabbinical Judaism during the Middle Ages. Within the story, Moses asks God to spare his life, and when his wish is not granted, he appeals to the land of Israel, heaven, stars, sun and moon, Mount Sinai, and all the mountains, sea, rivers, and lakes, in addition to his fellow co-religionists. It seems that an obscure Yemenite midrash still contains this story on the rabbinic side. As a side note, it is quite possible that the entities appealed as hills, mountains, and other earthly and heavenly bodies that are appealed to could simply be guardian angels in charge of protecting those areas. The author continues with providing circumstantial evidence from halakhic texts which condemn the faithful from sacrificing animals to mountains, hills, seas, rivers, and deserts. Additionally, another Mishnaic passage contains supplementary prohibitions, such as not offering slaughtered animals to celestial bodies, angels, or other entities. The paper notes that if these passages exist, then it must mean that Jews from that period were practicing these religious customs so much that they warranted strict rebuttals. Prohibitions against Israelites getting circumcised by Samaritans are also mentioned, since they dedicate the act to Mount Gerizim, their holy mountain. Another example of the commonality of appealing to angels is seen in the Babylonian Talmud, prayer of someone who is about to enter the privy, or bathroom, asking them not to follow him inside. The author also mentions the 4th century Jewish criticism of Christians for worshipping objects, trees, and stones, which can be seen as somewhat ironic, since Jews themselves were partaking in these practices a few centuries earlier. The third category of evidence presented in the paper is that of prayers to saintly individuals in the Tanaitic and later texts. The Tanaim, represent the group of rabbinic sages that are recorded within the Midrash from the 1st to the 3rd centuries AD. The paper presents the idea that prayers towards prophets and holy people is established from Scripture, and their intercessions are accepted as being able to gain the favor of God and produce miracles, including healing the sick. 3 examples are presented that deal with famous rabbis that ask for intercessions from other famous rabbis for healings and blessings. Thus, living human intercession represents an accepted practice within rabbinical Judaism. The final group is about prayers to ancient patriarchs and matriarchs. These are Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, and Jacob with Rachel and Leah. Due to the eventual disappearance of purity laws, which prohibit the faithful from visiting graves, people begin to offer intercessory prayers at famous resting places. The paper presents a few examples, such as spies sent up to Hebron, prostrating themselves on the graves of the patriarchs, and a 3rd century rabbi mentioning visiting grave sites in order for the dead to intercede for mercy on the living. God himself is recorded as promoting this practice in Lamentations Rabbah, where the Lord instructs the prophet Jeremiah, quote, to summon Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Moses, for they know how to weep. End quote. Additionally, the prophets are portrayed as shouting and weeping over the holy temple. In Genesis Rabbah, we find the matriarch Rachel also weeping and interceding for her descendants. Her tomb is next described as a pilgrimage site for the exiled Jews, as Rachel would arise and intercede God on their behalf, succeeding in her attempts. A similar occurrence happens with Prophet Samuel's burial site as well. Eventually, these practices of praying at graves start to be criticized by halakhic authorities, even though they survive to this day, especially within the Chabad community. Overall, the paper presented a plethora of passages and textual evidence that support the central thesis that ancient Jews had intercessory prayers to angels, humans, and even prayed at the graves of holy men of the past. We agree with the conclusions derived from this article, as the arguments correlate naturally from the data that we currently possess. The evidence provided falls into 4 categories: the existence of intercessory prayers from the Middle Ages that are still used today by rabbinical Jewish communities, the condemnations against the use of intercessory prayers by Talmudic authorities, the widespread use of requesting mediation from holy men within the faithful community, and the prayer at famous gravesites coupled with condemnation of these practices. The continuous usage of intercessory prayers, at gravesites or not, shows the surprising resilience of this pious custom that has survived centuries of condemnation and prohibition, and reinforces the author's presupposition that this tradition could not have originated all of a sudden during the Middle Ages, but instead have a more ancient beginning. While we cannot comprehensively prove that this is indeed the case, if we couple these claims together with the Apostolic Church's tradition of invoking saints, we're starting to get a fuller picture of the 1st century religious situation in the Levant. Minimally, the position that prayers to saints and celestial bodies represent an accretion seems to be now untenable. We must also remember that the scope of this paper is to support the idea that intercessory prayers not only existed, but were a common occurrence in Second Temple and post-Second Temple Judaism, and not to argue for the orthodoxy of these religious practices. The fact that intercessory prayers to angels and holy men of the past were being said by ancient Jews is no longer disputed. Instead, we should redirect our energy into trying to piece together either what led the faithful into erroneously seeking invalid celestial mediation, or why the governing religious elites reversed the validity of intercessory prayers. We hope that we faithfully represented this excellent paper and wish to popularize it further within the internet and religious spheres. The discussion regarding the validity of intercessory prayers within apostolic churches can benefit greatly from articles regarding Second Temple and early rabbinical Judaism. By showing evidence of not only ancient Jewish practice of intercessory prayers, but also contemporary ones, can help alleviate the fears of Protestant interlocutors that claim that ancient Christianity was devoid of any veneration of saints. We believe that this article represents one of the stepping stones for future Orthodox Protestant dialogue moving forward. Thank you for watching, and may God bless you all, and may you pursue truth without cessation and grow endlessly in wisdom. For reason is the guide of the virtues, but over the passions it is sovereign.